10 things you need to know before moving to Mexico. But you don't have to just take my word for it, because Mexico is big and there's lots of ways to do things, so we're gonna get other people's opinion as well. Everyone knows that you cannot drink the tap water here in Mexico, but how do you get drinking water? Honestly, there's lots of ways.
In some communities, you need to find out the water delivery schedule in advance and then order water when you're almost out.
In Merida, Karen was super lucky because she actually had filtered water in her tap, so she could drink her tap water. Other methods I've used, especially when I first got here, I literally just walked the area near my neighborhood, and eventually a truck will drive by that sells water. And I stopped one of them and said, hey, how much for one? Now I had to chug that thing all the way to my house, which was not pleasant, but we got water. You could also go to some of the small tiendas, the small stores near your home. They of course sell water in various different sizes, but if you want the really large jugs, sometimes they actually will not sell that to you. They would much rather a trade. And if you've got the wrong brand bottle, one super sweet tienda, he actually transferred the water from his bottle into my bottle so I would have something to drink. This tienda has no name, but it is where I went to for water the first time. But other people really hate having the large jugs. And again, they are super heavy. And so it's not really just a matter of being able to carry those jugs in the home, but maneuvering it.
This is what I get from the grocery store, or if I'm going myself, I try to bring one of those back or something smaller. You can get those really big ones. I don't want to be lifting and turning and doing and having.
Now you can absolutely get little pumps that you can put inside so that you're not constantly tipping that entire jug up. Personally, I'm not a fan of those because I find them really difficult to clean. So I prefer to just pour it into a pitcher. At least once a week, I call Victor and he brings me 2 jugs of water. Well, however much water I want, but I've got 2 jugs from him and this is what he gives me. When this is full, this is pretty heavy. It's not impossible to carry at all, but it is pretty heavy. So in terms of daily use, it gets pretty inconvenient. So I have a pitcher, I refill this, and this is what I use for drinking, brushing our teeth, hot tea, like just anything where I'm going to consume it. Much more convenient to have a pitcher or 2, especially if you've got a larger fridge, because in Merida, we used to have a pitcher that we kept in the fridge because Merida is hot. Here in San Cris, room temperature is fine. And there are a handful of people who either purchase or bring their own water filtration system like a Berkey. What can you use the tap water in Mexico for?
I've been brushing my teeth with the tap water since the day I got to Mexico.
I brush my teeth with it, I shower in it, I use it when I cook, I use it when I wash food, wash vegetables and things.
When you're brushing your teeth, don't use the tap water. Take a bottle of water, use it for that.
Do I brush my teeth with it? Yes. Do I wash my vegetables and fruits with it? Yes.
I would say universally, most people use it to wash their dishes, to take a shower, clean their home. But the other things people use their water for really does depend. I use it to wash my vegetables. I do not use it to brush my teeth. I do not boil it for any reason, so my hot tea is always drinkable water. Soup or pasta, those are also drinking water. Now, because I've been traveling my entire life, I practice what I like to call the safest measures when it comes to handling tap water. I also want Alex's kind of natural habits to lean in the safest way just to reduce risk. So we do not brush our teeth with the water. We don't drink it after boiling it, etc. I do use it to clean uncut vegetables, but if I am, let's say, soaking cut up potatoes, I'm not going to use the tap water. I'm going to use bottled. And because this means I'm using more bottled water than maybe some people are using, I always use the large garrafones to reduce plastic usage, at least a little bit. Number 3 is that your body and your kids' bodies and even your dog's body has to adjust to the new country, the new location. This includes far more than just the drinking water or like the bacteria that people worry about when it comes to food.
I'm talking about your stomach, your skin, like if you deal with allergies, your system has to get acclimated to the new environment.
It's really hard to avoid, and the first few times that I came to Mexico, I did get sick.
So yes, you and your entire family, to include your pets, have to deal with the new water supply, the new foods, the humidity will be different, the spices they use in foods will be different, the sound, the noise, the material they use on bedding, on clothing, at restaurants, like just so many things are different when you travel, when you go to new locations. So you should expect not only to occasionally get sick, but to sometimes have really, really weird results. Skin conditions could be a thing. Some people get really dry patches. Some people get a lot of acne outbreaks. I would say, generally speaking, when it comes to Montezuma's revenge, the first time you get sick in a new location is probably going to be your worst. As you live in a location, as you walk outside, breathe the air, enjoy the foods, your body gets more and more acclimated to that location, and therefore, even if you do get sick again, it's usually not quite as bad as the first time, and in fact, at some point, may entirely go away. And something that we talk about, but we don't talk about, is when dealing with new foods, it is possible that you've got an actual food intolerance towards things. So in terms of Mexico, let's just hope it's not tomatoes and frijoles. Number 4 is that cuisine is regional.
Food in the state of Yucatan, for instance, is so different than if you go to the northern parts of Mexico.
I think a lot of times when somebody says, hey, let's get some American food, probably we're talking about pizza and hamburgers. But we also know that Maine has the best lobster rolls and clam bakes. Louisiana is known for jambalaya and beignets. And California is known for avocado toast. Likewise, the Yucatan has the best salbutes, the best panuchos, and aguas frescas. While here in San Cris, I've enjoyed the best tamales, chipilin, and pozole.
An improvised tamal!
Beautiful.
We combined the Venezuelan string with the Mexican wrapper.
That's perfect.
We even have a lot of Oaxacan influences like clayudas and garnaches. I am hearing that the further north you go, the more likely you're going to come up with kind of the Tex-Mex style of Mexican food that we're used to. And as a side note, similar to Mexican food in the US being different from the Mexican food you'll find here in Mexico, please understand that Japanese cuisine, French cuisine, Italian cuisine in the US is different from those countries. And here in Mexico, you're gonna have further interpretations of those cuisines. So Japanese food in Mexico is gonna be different than the Japanese food we find both in the US and of course in Japan itself. Let's talk about money. Number 5 is the exchange rate. So a lot of times in my videos, I really prefer to let you know how much something costs via pesos. And while sometimes I do give the US dollar equivalent, the fact is that the US to peso exchange rate changes on a day-to-day basis, and it's really hard to determine. In the almost 2.5 years that I've lived here, I've seen it as low as 18 pesos to a dollar and as high as 25 pesos, which means when it comes to a 9,500 peso rent, my monthly rent can fluctuate from $370 US a month to about $520. Let's hope it never gets higher than that.
Don't forget to consider the currency fluctuations. Bottom line.
Number 6 is that you're gonna wanna have multiple ways to access money.
Just keep your bank where you live and deposit all your checks in there. Get a debit card and just use that.
Almost impossible to open Mexican bank account without having your temporary residency visa.
The ATM fees really killed us when we were first starting out here. If you're American, I recommend opening a Charles Schwab high yield checking account.
Charles Schwab checking account.
We have a card with Charles Schwab.
Any ATM fees we pay, we get refunded, and they don't charge any fees or any foreign transaction fees, which is great.
But there are other alternatives. Make sure you do your research beforehand.
We still have our US bank account. We still have our debit card with that bank account. The bank that we use in particular doesn't charge any foreign transaction fees.
For myself, I have 2 different banks with 2 different debit cards, one which charges an international transaction fee, one which does not, both of which at the end of the month gives me my money back for any ATM usage. But I also do have PayPal, which I've had to use a handful of times, and I'm so grateful I've had it. And I've used Zoom once, which is a PayPal affiliate transfer service, but Wise is probably one of the more popular ones. Again, I don't actually use Wise myself, but it's very popular. And a related reason why you're gonna wanna have multiple ways to access your cash is because
Foreign cards are sometimes not accepted.
The American credit cards, sometimes they work on Mexican sites, sometimes they do not.
A Mexican website or app will not always accept your foreign cards. For myself, I'm always getting my ADO tickets in person because I've just had the worst luck trying to buy bus tickets via the app, although one time it just magically worked. I also have trouble using Telcel on my phone, but for some reason on my desktop it works perfectly fine. But there are other websites where you might have trouble using your card, and so having multiple cards really increases the chance that you'll be able to purchase with your card, or you might have to use a transfer service like Wise or Zoom to make that work. And of course, everybody knows that cash is king.
If you shop at the big stores, they accept credit cards, no problem. But if you want to experience delicious street food or you want to buy souvenirs, it's better to have your cash handy.
Our landlord prefers being paid in cash.
You take a cab, you're going to have to pay in cash. If you go to a small convenience store, you're going to have to pay in cash. Some restaurants will only accept cash.
I always pay my rent in cash. Now, while I really prefer the smaller tiendas and the smaller stores, which really only accepts cash, there are lots of places that actually do accept cards. I think Karen tends to use her card much more frequently than I ever would. And Serge says that he really doesn't need that much cash.
At least in the cities that we've lived in and in our lives, we've always used cards way more than we use cash. Here in Mexico City, even if you go to street food stands, a lot of the times they accept cards.
But I would argue no matter what part of Mexico you're in, you're always gonna have to have cash for using public bathrooms, especially when traveling with a kid. I myself tend to avoid public bathrooms whenever I can. They're not necessarily that bad, but they do lean small, which I'm not a huge fan of. But for Alex's sake, having pesos on me is super important. The amount of pesos really does vary. In Merida, I feel like 6 pesos was the norm. Here in San Cris, I've seen it as low as 2. So far, I've never seen more than 6 pesos, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. And in order to tip, you're often gonna wanna have cash. And number 9, as much as Facebook drives me nuts, you've got to be on Facebook and join the various communities.
I wish I joined community Facebook group prior coming to Mexico.
While being on a general kind of Mexico group is helpful, hone in on the particular cities you're looking for. I think I'm part of like 6 different city-specific Facebook groups because I know I'm not going to be in San Cris forever, and so I'm kind of keeping an eye on where I might go next. City-specific will give you much more accurate information for that location than a generic Mexico site. And as you guys know, once I pick my city, I start to build community via Facebook because it's honestly just the easiest way. While it's not the only way, it's really convenient. And last but not least, number 10.
It is your responsibility to try and learn Spanish.
You need to know a little bit of Spanish.
Learn the language in order to get by. Otherwise, you are going to make your life very, very, very difficult.
Trying to speak the language is always better than not.
Learn Spanish. You shouldn't let not knowing Spanish be a reason you don't move down here.
Even if it's not perfect, just give it a try.
Listen, my Spanish is far from perfect. I have so much more learning to do.
Mexicans are super friendly and understanding and will help you out if you are struggling.
Well, I hope you found this video super helpful. If you haven't watched them yet, I would highly recommend one of these 2 videos that talks about the things I do not like about the 2 cities that I've lived in so far.